Communication Workers Union is hoping for stability in the sector as Khumbudzo Ntshavheni takes over as the new minister in President Cyril Ramaphosa's redesigned cabinet. Ntshavheni's successor, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, or predecessor, I should say, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, had been criticized for underwhelming progress on South Africa's digital technology growth, as well as the labor challenges at the likes of the national broadcaster, the SABC, the public broadcaster. Aubrey Tshabalala is General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, joining us now live, I believe, from the side of a road from your car. Aubrey, thank you for making time to be on Newsfeed PM. Let's start first with something that you have raised in your reaction to the appointment of a new minister, and you're worried about the number of ministers who've been in this portfolio over the past 27 years.
Good afternoon to you and also to Begil and also to the viewers. It is true, the communication department has changed up until 13 ministers in the last 13 years. So on average, it's one minister per year. We know that there was some stages under the administration of President Jacob Zuma where some ministers were reshuffled within a short space of months. That led us to this high number of ministers. But having said that, I think it must be acknowledged the work that has been done by Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams in the sector, and we're hoping that now we're sensing some sense of stability with that minister and trying now to bring a working together with the department and labor in various assets. As you know that this department has been also engulfed with a number of controversies, including the retrenchment of workers in the sector, including the public broadcaster, and some areas where we believe that some of the companies that have been there have been doing very well even under the COVID-19. As you look at the telecoms, they've been the gainers of this COVID-19. But however, we've seen retrenchment. So the change of the minister, it might somehow destabilize that. What comforts us a little bit is the experience that the new minister comes up with.
Interesting that you speak about the new minister and her experience, because she is leaving the Ministry of Small Business Development where, let's be clear, she didn't get a 5-star rating.
Not at all. Not at all. That's our view. She did not get that. But what do? We are not actually government. That's why we are not really excited about the change of the minister. But this is what we have to work with, and we think that perhaps she'll come in, and work very hard and prove us wrong and turn things around. But of course, as a trade union movement, we'll obviously have to work with her as she comes into this sector.
And why do you think there's been such a high turnover rate at communications? Almost every time, as you pointed out, that there's almost every time that there's cabinet reshuffle, the communications ministry is affected. Do you think that the various presidents in the last 2 decades have underestimated what's needed there?
It's a very complex industry, lucrative as well. We must not take that away. So interests are high. If you recall, there was some stage where this department was divided into two, postal and telecoms, and also communication. It was rematched again under Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. That will tell you the interest in this sector. I mean, we have institutions like EU SASA that really runs with high amount of money that has to offer tenders. We also have the CETA that has not been doing very well. So the interests are very high. So you need a stability. The last minister that really stayed long in this, it was under the president of President Thabo Mbeki. Unfortunately, that legacy was not carried over up until this point in time. So it's very important that we highlight to government that the changing of ministers from time to time, it will have a negative impact in the sector, particularly that this is not a stable sector. Why I'm saying that it's fluid. There's change of digital technologies. There's introduction of 4IR. The broadcasting industry as a whole is changing very rapidly and very quickly. Telecoms are changing and moving in a fast pace. So you need someone who's grounded there. You need someone who understands the department, as it were. I mean, post office challenges that it faces at this point in time. You don't need to sharpen change. You must be careful about what you do in terms of the changes.
Aubrey, I want to ask you about something else that's developing around the SABC, an issue about the presence of the SANDF either in or around the premises. We've just got a statement in the last hour from the public broadcaster saying that it's confirming the deployment of members of the South African National Defence Force to ensure physical security of the public service broadcaster's premises and staff at most of its national key point premises around the country, including the headquarters, Auckland Park. What do you understand to be going on with the military and the SABC recently?
It worries us, Tembegile. Firstly, last week, SABC attempted to have surveillance on workers. They wanted to monitor their cell phones, their laptops, interfere with SMSs, and so on and so forth. That alone, we raised a flag, and the SABC did turn around, because it appears as if there's some way or the other interference with the newsroom and to monitor journalists. Now you go beyond that, you bring an army in the democratic country where there's no serious really threat. Yes, you may count one car that during the riots of the last 2 weeks, which many media institutions experienced challenges during that time, you might count it as say that it's a threat, but it's not a significant threat. You bring an army as if there is a threat for a coup in this country to monitor workers. So we're really not comfortable with that. And they did not even involve labor in this move. Remember that even when they were trying to do their surveillance on workers, they did not involve labor. So surely we are going to write to them and engage them and try to find out what is it that the SABC management is up to, what is it that threatens the public broadcaster to such a point that it now deploys an army on an institution that was never on a single day attacked. That will require an army.
Let me read for you another line then, second paragraph from the statement by the SABC today. It says, as a national key point area, delivering an essential service to the nation and considering the recent attacks on SABC journalists, it was deemed necessary that the physical premises and employees working in the offices be protected. It then goes on to say the SABC dismisses with the necessary contempt the misleading and malicious allegations that there's an ulterior motive for the presence of the members of the SANDF on its premises. So if you as a union were to, as you're saying, going to write to them now, be given a briefing about the safety of workers in the building, would you be comfortable at all with military presence outside the building?
No, I don't think there's any reason that will justify military presence outside and inside the building of SABC. I mean, we have a number of national key points. I mean, if you talk about the security of water in that space, you will expect if SABC will have an army, they will have an army. I mean, we have an airport where people come in and out of the country. It's a national key point. What warrants SABC to bring soldiers in a public broadcast? Is it not that interference with the freedom of speech, public broadcaster, the freedom of press and all of that? Why you have to instill fear? If, of course, there was somehow some threat, I'm sure police will be sufficient. I'm sure the security officers outside SABC will be sufficient. But an army, it really raises an eyebrow. We'll want to hear what will be the reasoning behind it.
And Aubrey, what is your sense? Have you had any kind of complaints from your members, especially in the SABC newsroom, who say they feel exposed perhaps to more risk in recent weeks?
Well, journalists, including yourself, Tembegile, always, and we've been raising this issue forever, that journalists always experiences danger wherever they are working. I mean, if you look at the journalists that covered the story of Marikana, they were exposed to live bullets, I mean, in that space. But it continued. And I mean, the response by SABC at some stage, they even bought bulletproof, where we felt is not necessary. But we think that there should be a broader discussion around the safety of journalists. But to bring an army, it's not in response to that particular issue, because you are basically saying that you'll be around the building of SABC. What happens to a journalist, a field worker, that will go to a riot area and cover a story there? Will you bring an army along that journalist? How many officers that will be walking or driving around with journalists is not practical. So we need to have a discussion around that.
Okay.
But we condemn the deployment of the army to SABC.
I wonder if this will give you comfort. Again, I'm going to quote from the statement where the SABC says, the public broadcaster would like to make it clear that any presence by the SANDF in the newsroom would be unacceptable and not in line with the SABC's public mandate and editorial policies. Does that soothe your nerves somewhat?
It's self-contradictory. If you are going to call an army and say there is a serious threat, but at the same time, you who's calling an army, you are saying where they should be deployed and where they should stand, because you are not an expert of security. So it shows that calling an army is not necessary about the security, but it's something else. There must be an ulterior motive, and we must get to the root of it.
Well, it says that the members of the SANDF are speaking with the SABC's internal security to familiarize themselves with internal security processes and national key point activities, including news.
Yes, but you should start first with labor. In those discussions, if it was necessary, workers of SABC in terms of organized labor, they should have been consulted, they should have been in the meeting so that we can raise our objection or we can understand where the management is coming from. That is done in secret. It's only now when they are responding to the outrage that they are explaining all of these things to us. But we're still asking the same reason. Do we need an army to protect an institution that has been there for the past 85 years? It's never been threatened to this day. Do we need an army?